All right, AP Bio. This is lecture 3, part 2. So let's go ahead and get this going. Lecture 3, part 2. Origin of Species, the book Darwin wrote. He never used the word evolution, although the final word of the book is evolved. Rather, he discussed descent with modification, a phrase that summarizes his view of life. Right? Remember again, descent, shared ancestry, and modification, the accumulation of differences. And so here's an example of descent with modification. Again, way back here would be a common ancestor. Again, this is a cladogram. Gotta have millions of years for all these changes to accumulate. And so here's a common ancestry of living elephants. Woolly mammoth. Bringing it back, right? Should bring it back, maybe bring it back, who knows, right? And so this is an example of, descent with modification. All these living organisms are related, and some of them are extinct. Notice like the symbols. But again, related. Summarize some of the main ideas. Natural selection is a process in which individuals have certain heritable traits, survive and reproduce at a higher rate, thus passing those traits on, increasing those frequencies of those adaptations. Okay? Related species of the insects called mantises have diverse shapes and colors that evolved in different environments. As seen in this Malaysian orchid mantis and the South African flower-eyed mantis. Well, there's the orchid mantis, and that's the flower-eyed mantis. Again, what, right? And so they can see how life is well suited for their environment, as well as the unity and diversity of life. They're related, but they're very different. Okay, and so we will talk about these finches in class and maybe watch a video about them and stuff. But yeah, the adult beaks on Daphne major, the finches on Daphne major, done by Peter and Rosemary Grant, like they definitely saw some changes within those birds. So very, very interesting. Okay, so you can pause here and do these questions. We'll go over the answers in class. And so genetic variation, what makes evolution possible? Genetic variation does. Okay, if everybody's the same, how does natural selection choose anything? Well, it doesn't. Okay, so you have to have variation in a population. So here's an example of variation. This diagram summarizes data from a study comparing the deguanase sequence of the alcohol dehydrogenase gene in several fruit flies. The ADH gene has 4 exons separated by introns. Okay, the exons include the coding regions that ultimately translate into amino acids of the ADH gene. So these are kept, right? RNA splicing. The dark blue is kept. Only one substitution has a phenotypic effect, producing a different form of the ADH gene. So you can see all the different substitutions there, but only one results in a different amino acid. How in the world can there be so many changes, and yet only one difference? And so this is an example of the redundancy of the genetic code, right? How multiple different codons are coded for, how the same codon is encoded for by different, wow, I'm really messing this up. Let's try again. How the same amino acid, is encoded by multiple different codons. Okay, so you can change a letter, but you still might get the exact same amino acid, and you would get the same form of the protein and the same, function. So some phenotypic variation does not result from genetic differences. Phenotype is the product of both inherited and environmental influences. We're talking epigenetics there, a fascinating field. And so natural selection only acts on phenotypes. And so here's a non-heritable variation. These caterpillars of the moth Nemoria arizonaria owe their different appearances to chemicals in their diets, not to differences in their genotypes. Epigenetics, right? Caterpillars raised on a diet of oak flowers resemble the flowers, whereas their siblings raised on oak leaves resemble oak twigs. That is insane, okay? How certain genes can be turned on or off. Genetic variation results when new Alleles and genes are produced through mutation, gene duplication, or other processes. Sexual reproduction creates genetic variation by arranging existing alleles in new ways. So new alleles, how do they come and be? How do we get variation? New alleles can arise by mutation, which is a change, we talked about changes caused by errors in DNA replication or exposure to high energy radiation or certain chemicals. Point mutations are single nucleotide changes. Mutations that alter the phenotype are most often harmful. Rarely they can increase fitness of organisms' chance of surviving and reproducing. Mutations in non-coding regions often result in neutral variation, differences that do not confer a selective advantage or disadvantage. Non-coding regions, which means like something that wouldn't change the phenotype. Mutations that delete, disrupt, duplicate, or rearrange many loci are typically harmful. Duplication may not be harmful because you can duplicate genes and they can maybe accumulate mutation and take on new functions. There are some studies done that can show that. For example, humans and mice have hundreds of copies of an ancestral odor detecting gene, enabling them to detect and distinguish many different smells. Mutation rates are generally very low. The average is about 1 in every 100,000 genes per generation. Mutation rates are slower in prokaryotes, but short generation times allow for short lifespans, allow for rapid accumulation. Rapid reproduction. Mutation rates are faster in viruses because their RNA genome cannot be repaired by host cells. Viruses are also able to accumulate mutations rapidly. Think like COVID, right? So many variants, right? Due to their short generation times. And so sexual reproduction, this is super important, right? Recombination of alleles, creating new combinations. Crossing over happens when? Prophase 1. Random assortment. Metaphase 1, fertilization, egg plus sperm. And so here's some questions for this part 2 of lecture 3. Explain why genetic variation within a population is a prerequisite for evolution. Why is genetic variation necessary? Of all mutations that occur in a population, why do only a small fraction become widespread? And then finally, number 3, if a population stopped reproducing sexually, but still reproduced asexually, how would its genetic variation be affected over time? That's a great question, seeing if you understand multiple different concepts over this course of this year. So try your best on those. We'll talk about them in class. Hey, as always, super proud of you. Much love in Christ. God bless.